Hello and welcome to coverage of Week 10 of the Louisville Cube League Season 4. Today we'll be covering Prose's draft of the Vintage Cube, following him through the draft and deck building before watching 3 matches in a King of the Hill format. Today's draft was a 9-man, so we won't be following our traditional bracket structure, and you may notice a few less cards wheeling during the draft than normal. If you are interested in hearing more about our season as a whole, please be sure to check out the first video in the Season 4 playlist as it goes more in depth on the structure of the format of our league as a whole. But for today, let's go ahead and get into the draft with the rest of our commentators.
Hello and welcome back to the Louisville Cube League's drafts. My name's Joey.
I'm Prose.
And I'm Scott.
And we're getting into a vintage draft again. Here we have A-Call quickly pulled to the front.
Yeah, not a lot of decision making out of the pack. There's not a lot
What
of
do you say, man? What do you say? You open up power and no other piece of power. It's like, okay, yeah, you took the power. Not a lot of interesting discussion there.
Yeah. The second pack, nothing too exciting to pair it up with. I came into this draft thinking about trying to focus on Boros colors because I think it's currently the best 2 colors in the cube.
So even after picking a blue card, you don't feel like that shifts that much?
I don't think so. I think A Call is not a hard card to fit into about any deck. But mostly I was just saying that because that's the reason that NT gets pulled to the front here.
And I guess when you say thinking about Boros, like seeing Inti, we would think aggro, but Boros, you could mean Jeskai control or any colors touching those, just because the power of red and white you're saying you estimate to be really high in the cube right now.
Right.
Got 4th Aerolingus.
Yeah, this pack, 4th Aerolingus and Pyrogoyf in this pack. Kind of a choice of like which direction you want to go, I guess. There's also a Time Twister, which is interesting, but I don't think it's on the same level as either of these 2 cards, personally.
That's fair. Not having any white cards yet, I think I would take the Pyrogoyf, but I think this is probably pretty close.
Yeah, this pick took me a minute. I mean, this was 3rd pick, and neither of those cards had been touched, so obviously there's always like power or something in there, but pretty interesting. But yeah, went with the 4th.
I think one other point in Pyrogoyf's favor is it's less likely to put the person to your left into your colors to pass 4th Aerolingus. Like, maybe they take a red-white card, but at least that's red-white, and if you had stayed just red-blue. But here, committing to it seems fine. Almost certainly got to take a land here after taking cards of 3 different colors and seeing several lands in your combination here.
Yeah, and the 2 on-color lands, or 2 on-color duels, really attractive here. There's also Caracas, which is technically on color, and much has been said about just the increasing power level of that card as we go on, and Wizards continues to be liberal with their legends.
Yeah, and the dual lands offered here are not like the most valuable things in the world, right? Like there's not a revised duel or a fetch land. So they're cards you would definitely play in your deck, but excited to pick them 4th, I'm not so sure.
For sure, but if we end up in a more controlling deck and we do get any number of fetches, the Meticulous Archive would definitely be a very welcome addition.
But yeah, I went with the Caracas and basically immediately rewarded here with the option of this volcanic island.
I was going to say, I hadn't seen it pulled to the front yet, but I have to imagine that's the pick.
Yeah, Tinker, I think, pulled to the front on principle, but would be just very spec at this point. But yeah, the volcanic island seems perfect for what we're trying to do here. If we live in a world where A-Call is the only blue card in the deck at the end of the day, that's a world that I'm happy to be in. And yeah, a single fetch land obviously takes that a long way. And here is a fetch land, but not one that can fetch that volcanic island.
Yeah, this would be a pick for the future if you find a white blue or white red duel. Yeah. If you're still trying to be Boros splashing ancestral, but not necessarily something you have to windmill slam here.
Right. There was also a Spars in the last pack, which may or may not wheel, which would be really good for that Windswept Teeth. But
I think No More Lies, Snapcaster Mage, and I'm blanking on the Wizard card right now that's in your hand. Flame of Anor.
I
I think any of those kind of signal that a Jeskai control deck could be open, and any of those picks could have allowed you to lean more heavily into that. But
Yeah, I went with the Chrome Mox. I have the fourth. Having a way to get ahead of the curve on mana seems really nice with that in mind.
and you have Inti, which kind of rewards a more aggressive lean. So going back to the idea of Boros splashing blue instead of a more controlling deck, I think is fine.
That last pick was Prismatic Ending over, maybe a splash spell pierce, but
Yeah, this pick really questionable. I don't really know why I took this Nettle Cyst. Not a lot exciting in the pack, but
We saw you also considering the Tinker earlier. Were you also thinking, you mentioned thinking about Boros, were you also thinking about artifacts at some point during this, do you think?
not currently. I mean, I have the Chrome Mox, I guess, and so it's just like there's always like you're in blue, so like I think I would like pretty easily pick a Tameo or something at this point, but I I don't know. The Nettle Cyst still seems really weird. Nothing else exciting in that pack, I guess, but yeah, just Static Prison here.
Nelsis gets buffed by that Static Prism.
That's true. Yeah,
I always forget that it also counts enchantments, but
I often have a very weak spot for Shelldock Isle, but this does not seem like a deck currently that's going to have a lot of cards that I'm going to be excited to put under a Shelldock Isle in the early game. So, just
right.
taking the only
Burst
other-
Lightning seems like a good pickup here.
Yeah.
Ooh. Unexpectedly Absent, also very nice pickup to get here, it feels like.
Yeah, really happy
That
with
pack
that one.
didn't have very much else good in it for anyone at the table. I don't think.
as this first pack winds down here, are you still like trying to be Boros, maybe aggro or mid range, splashing the ancestral? Or are we shifting a little bit? It doesn't seem like white aggressive cards are coming to you at any point, really.
Yeah, I think aggro is mostly out the window. We did get that third path Iconoclast and then Spars and Treasure Cruise at the end, so pretty nice into the pack. So I think at this point I'm sitting in like I feel like I'm sitting in like a Jeskai Spells shell currently, and pretty happy with it on that front so far. The NT is kind of out of place, but
Well, it almost looks like you could be like blue-red spells and just splash the fourth Aerolingus potentially.
yeah, also an option for sure. Tundra
Right,
here, very nice.
That pack, one other thing I would have maybe considered would be the Legion Extruder, leading into, if you're going to be more blue-red, leaning more in towards the artifact theme that seemed to be open later in that pack.
As your best in Urza.
Yeah.
I mentioned getting third path Iconoclast late last pack, seeing Urza now.
Yeah, so this
maybe.
this Urza, we talked about the artifact stuff. Second pick Urza here, doing a lot of thinking here about whether or not I feel like I can build around this. Hull Breacher was also staring at me in this pack. I had passed the Time Twister earlier, obviously, but I have NT, so something like Echo of Eons has some ways to throw around. But yeah, looks like we just go with the Hull Breacher. Didn't want to feel too greedy taking that Urza and trying to like kind of pivot here. Although almost immediately we just start seeing more cards that I think we would have picked if we had taken the Urza. The Mightstone, Weakstone there. The Generous Plunderer would have been really good in that spot. Also good here, but I don't know why Lightning Greaves got pulled to the front.
I imagine Generous Plunderer is the pick here.
Yeah, Plunder and Lelia, both cards that I was picking between here. I think I actually put the Plunder in the stack at one point and then pulled it back out to continue thinking. This is me putting it into the pile. So, and then yep, just immediately reconsider. I don't really remember the exact train of thought there. I think those two cards are like generally pretty close, but I do think the Plunder in hindsight probably would have been better.
So Hallowed Fountain looks nice here. Death Greaves Champion looks nice. Did you consider Felidar Guardian at all being in the colors for that combo?
I did not, because I'm fairly certain. I know that I saw Saheeli in this draft. I'm pretty sure it was pack 1. This Mother of Runes taunted me, and I took it. I don't think I should have. I don't think I'm the deck for it. I think the Hallowed Fountain would have been much better.
Like seeing Fire Ice here. It feels like
Yeah.
when you're kind of between ideas here, a nice modal card like that.
Mm-hmm.
Want it in
Yeah,
any version of this deck.
not much else really. The fear of missing out is an option, and we have NT, we have some artifacts, so probably just doing a quick glance here for just like whether or not it's going to be easy to turn that FOMO on, but I don't. Yeah, just gonna go with the fire ice. So getting a lot of like interactive spells, though not necessarily like premier ones. This pack I don't
Copy artifact,
remember.
a new addition to our cube list, put in by a former 3-0 competitor.
Yeah. Pulled to the front initially, but not really anything to copy with it. I mean, there's the Nettle Cyst, but I don't really feel like I'm necessarily playing that at this point. But
Right, but this pack's so weak for you that
Mhm.
maybe you take it as a sideboard card. I could understand, because as much as this pack hasn't been as kind to you as the first, you haven't picked up very many misses, so I
Right.
think it would be fine to take a card that's maybe pretty decent in a sideboard matchup over either of these other more marginal cards, if that ends up being the choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just went with the Phoenix. Again, not really sure why beyond just the thought of like this is a deck that's going to be putting a lot of cards into the graveyard, so maybe something like the bestow cost on that thing from the graveyard is worth it or something. But some more lands here. Steam Fence is nice. Still no fetch lands, unfortunately.
For the record, I actually, Joey, think your mana base is good enough already that I would take the discharge over the steam vents,
Yeah, I didn't
but
do that, but
cannot fault the steam vents pick.
this is almost entirely a blank pack. I mean, there's this Carnosaur, I guess. I mean, Lumberjack is not a card we're ever casting. This card is probably not also ever seeing the light of day again, but
Carnosaur doesn't get enough respect. I think that card's pretty passable in most red decks.
oh, I think it's
Like,
very good. I just don't. I think this deck so far is so low to the ground that I don't see it as anything other than like a discarding it for its damage effect at this point.
sure, but that would trigger Inti.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it gives you. I don't know.
This is a count of cards that Clarion Conqueror would turn off. I am fairly certain at this point.
Another small synergy of the dinosaur. Sorry, it works really well with Lelia.
Yes. Yep. So I did take the Conqueror. I think I should have taken the delayed blast fireball there. But
Really like either of these. I assume Spellbinder's the slightly better pick, but for curve considerations, okay.
mm-hmm. I was really excited that this Thraben Inspector wheeled. There is Goblin Bombardment in that pack, but I'm definitely not playing that card at this point. And if I end up with a Johnny or something, whatever, I'll eat my words. But I'm definitely playing that Thraben Inspector and pretty happy about it. So
This feels like a good spot to mention that you remembered seeing Saheeli, because it feels like Felidar Guardian would be a perfectly reasonable spec here since your mana's already so good, but I imagine you'll end up taking the Colonnade instead just since Felidar Guardian's a little bit more of a blank. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, like I said, I remember seeing it in the draft. I do not remember which pack it was in. I mean, it definitely wasn't in this pack. So it was in either 1 or 3, I believe. But
Well, we'll see here in a minute.
we'll see.
Yeah, if it was still in play at this point, then I take it all back. But
Right. I remember seeing that thing table and being like very certain that I had seen Saheeli already and not taken it, so I just wasn't interested.
Mhm.
So Inspiring Vantage here, not super exciting.
Is there a
with all the
Chandra in
lands I
this
already
pack?
have. I
I'm a
think
little
so,
surprised
yeah.
you're not considering the Chandra here.
Yeah, this was, I think, a quick
Yeah.
land cruise through, which is definitely a reasonable amount of them, but won't this sink into stupor? Yeah, I think I don't know. I don't remember seeing Chandra in that pack on the day. It was definitely in there watching the video.
This looks like interesting. I guess my mindset of this draft is just very different because I would assume Jace or Ralgren Triome would be like the only two cards getting considered here, but looks like we got a little bit of a wider range.
Yeah, I mean,
like Path to Exile.
Yeah.
It maybe is a little unnecessary given the removal we already have.
Yeah, there is a lot of removal, but like I said before, it's not really like the premium removal. It's all like low.
Yeah.
There's a chance I'm just overvaluing Jace as well. Like, I'm still really impressed by that card in Q, but it's definitely not what it used to be, and maybe I'm still carrying too much of that with me.
Yeah, I lasered in on this Flage pretty early. Again, I talked about it with the Phoenix, but like a bunch of spells that are going to the graveyard, it should be pretty easy to have that thing's escape costs.
Yeah, Flage looks excellent here. There's a little tension with the Treasure Cruise you got in pack 1. I'm not sure if that's making the deck at this point, but having at least one of those cards to utilize some of the dead cards in your graveyard, an excellent idea.
Love to see this Palace Jailer here.
Yeah, the Palace Jailer. I have the Giver and the Drowner pulled up, but neither of them I think compete with that card in this point. Maybe Giver in another deck does, but certainly not in this one. Dak and the Plateau are really exciting here, but Spell Seeker currently gets me Ancestral Recall, Path to Exile, 4th Eagerlingus, and Unexpectedly Accent. So
it feels hard to pass up Spellseeker, even though I believe all of your duels are either blue-white or blue-red. Like, you don't have any white-red ones yet, so that plateau's super tempting. But
this Corey Steelcutter came to the front purely on the fact of it being a cool new card that I wanted to play with. But I'm not really sure there was anything else in this pack that would have competed with it regardless.
Yeah.
Eagles, maybe.
Yeah, the Eagles, and that may have been what we were checking for, plains, lands, but
again, your mana does seem pretty good for being solidly 3 colors.
I don't think I'm playing any of these cards really, so Trinket Mage, I guess, could get me that Chrome Mox or the Ghost Vacuum, but I'm just taking the Time Warp out of the pack. This Bobble, I think, because of the Steel Cutter, was way more interested in this.
Well, Steel Cutter, and it adds cards for your Cruise and or Flage.
Yeah, exactly. It's a non-creature spell for the Iconoclast. Puts cards
in your Nettle Cyst up. That thing's definitely in the deck, right?
Yeah, the one regret I have from this draft is how many like card draw spells that I like get by. That Thought Scour there, another one. Have the A-Call, obviously, and I think I let that influence my decisions a bit too much on some of these like kind of marginal picks.
Emir's Garden there being your first red-white X land, so that'll be useful.
Yeah, I'm not confident. Like, the mana seems so good that maybe I don't play it as just a tapped source, because I don't think you ended up with any fetch that can find it, so it would just be one land source.
Yeah, no fetch lands, unfortunately, which is my only real regret, but I didn't see a lot of them, and that, like I said, I remember seeing the Windswept Heath. That was definitely
that Heath that we
ideal
talked
one.
About. Because of that really garden, would have turned out to be a 3-color land, because you have white, blue lands and the garden, but we'll have to see how it comes together. Last pick, Cabal Ritual.
Just a Cabal Ritual, yeah. So yeah, not ideal. A few kind of like marginal spells made the way in, but this was where the deck ended up. Opted out of the Nettle Cyst. Although maybe, I don't know.
No. You were right to opt out.
Listen, we have the Static Prison, we have the Phoenix, That's
I'm not thrilled to see.
But no.
I'm not thrilled to see that the Phoenix made the deck.
Yeah, I'm not super excited about it either. I think that
I would say
is
this
probably the
deck
only card I don't like in the deck, but not a lot of other good options unless you want to try to play something like the Time Warp or something. I guess maybe like Enduring Curiosity could have been interesting. Maybe the Carnosaur is just better than the Phoenix, honestly. Even if you're just playing it for its discards cost, that is the same spot in the curve. So, yeah,
Maybe my biggest critique of this deck is just the lack of any sort of like cohesive plan. Like we have
Yeah.
some like early pressure, we have some like late game cards. It's just kind of a mishmash of like this is like what a vintage cube deck would look like, 10 years ago when people were just drafting cool cards, right?
Right.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It just may put you at a disadvantage for some of your matchups.
Right.
Is this deck only 14/15 because of the MDFC lands?
Yeah, I
Like,
counted Chrome Mox as a land here. We went really low.
so that would be
on
16?
lands. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was part of the reason that I shied so much away from the Curiosity, the Time Warp, a little bit the Carnosaur, was just that as is the Jailer, I believe, is the only thing that costs more than 4. I mean, Treasure Cruise does, but we're never paying more than 2 or 3 mana for that. Hopefully,
That's fair. I think one consideration I would have is that, like, when looking at the MDFC lands, like, Sink into Stupor is one of the better ones as a spell. So, but putting it in an otherwise 14 land deck makes it feel like it's always got to be a land, I imagine. So,
yeah. Yeah, there's probably a pretty good argument to just axe the Phoenix and put another land in that spot at the end of the day.
But you didn't, so let's see how that turned out for you.
That's true.
yeah, let's get into the matches. So, getting into the first match here, we have Prose against Spurlock. And Prose, I guess we didn't ask, like, we got a general idea, but how confident do you feel going into the first match?
I would say I like my deck. I think that some of the spells are kind of wanting, and like Scott said, the direction is kind of questionable. This Lurrus is Companion, by the way, which is among the spookiest things that can ever happen to you in Vintage Cube, I feel, on turn 0. But I like my deck. I don't know that I think it's like a knockout 3-0 or anything, but I was happy with it despite the slight lack of cohesiveness with a few of the pieces.
I don't know if I agree with your statement that Lurrus is scary, like, as a companion. Its pencil spells have gotten so good that I feel like if I have Lurrus, usually I'm looking to play it in the deck.
I exist in a world where if you're companioning Lurrus, it's because you have Black Lotus in your deck and nothing else.
Okay.
There are certainly decks that could companion Lurrus without it, but my assumption anytime I see a companion Lurrus is immediately that there's a Black Lotus in the deck. He didn't have a Black Lotus. He had a Psychic Frog, which is almost as scary.
I was going to say he's not letting up on the spookiness of his cards here.
Right, so we have the Spellseeker, which I kept this hand with the Spellseeker, excited that I could go get an Ancestral Recall, but immediately just have to spend it to go get this Path to Exile because I don't want to get eaten by this frog.
Does that indicate that you're going to try and chump block here to prevent any cards from the Psychic Frog, or
Would 100% block here?
Yeah, I would certainly block here.
Are you going to get the chance to?
No.
No, you're not.
And this is spooky to me. The statement from Spurlock. I mean, obviously, every card in his deck, every permanent card in his deck costs 2 or less. I was about to say Dismember doesn't cost 2 or less, but every permanent card costs 2 or less. So that would be a reason to leave up the mana, even if he didn't have something to do with it. But him choosing to pay the life instead of tap that Dark Slick Shores definitely spoke to maybe having something else to do with it. But again, drawing the card off the Psychic Frog means probably would have done that either way, I guess.
Right.
We saw a Spell Pierce go by in the draft, so that is certainly on my radar at the moment of something he could have here.
Definitely in play. So not leading with the path, it looks like. So leading with Flage.
I really like this, like him knowing about the path, like kind of makes him in a position where there's no good answers. I guess maybe it's better if he doesn't know about it and he goes in on the frog. But
Yeah.
like if he does go in on the frog, that tells you maybe not to use the path.
My real hope here was that he would be willing to let the frog die to this because he can get it back with Lurrus later instead of me having to path it, but instead he feeds the frog and
So Scott pointing out the spell pierce definitely makes it feel like I would definitely wait till Spurlock's turn. The question is, do you path on his upkeep or not? Or are you willing to take one hit, let him draw one card to
yeah,
make it more likely?
It was a bit surprising to me that he just gonna go with the vacuum here. I'll get to that in a second, but it was surprising to me that he opted to feed the frog, but I guess at the end of the day, him discarding these cards that he can just play with Lurrus anyways is basically just free counters on his frog. So like by the same logic that I wanted to get rid of the frog, he just doesn't care.
Yeah, but he didn't know there was a ghost vacuum coming.
Yeah, and so the reason that I did this was not correct. The reason that I did it was because I was spooked at the thought of Black Lotus into a Johnny, but that doesn't work because that's not how the companion rule works anymore. So despite Wizards changing that, it is still just forever ingrained in my brain. So, and just getting max punished here off of it with the Sculler coming, yeah.
Yeah, well, Spurlock found the white mana that he did not have so
Right.
far, so it really it seems like it unlocked, this big play at least, but potentially more.
Right.
Oh, true. From Prose's position last turn, Spurlock hadn't given any indication he was more than just blue-black.
Until he discarded the thing.
Until he discarded 2 white spells.
Right.
Yeah.
Voidwalker especially brutal here now that Flage is in the graveyard. So yeah, just a little bit of a misstep there, I think, with the vacuum instead of the path. Although I'm not sure that the board state would be much better had we pathed the frog, but I guess the Sculler would have taken the vacuum instead.
Right, and this vacuum is going to do at least a little bit of work.
Yeah, I mean, he picked up the Lurrus, so see, I don't know. Maybe we wouldn't actually have been in that much better of a spot, although he wouldn't have a frog, which would be a plus. We talked about the deck being essentially 14 lands, and to see 5 of them in play, 1 more in hand. Not
means we get to pop
ideal.
the vacuum.
It does mean we get to pop the vacuum, which does make the cards not tokens of them. I learned during this, so
that feels bad.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, a Johnny is a May effect, I believe.
Yes.
But yeah. Yeah, so there is the 5th mana, although nothing really left in the graveyard to do with the Lurrus at this point.
Right. I mean, at minimum, this could be... Oh, no, this pickup Lurrus.
Hadn't been picked up, it had just been moved off screen, sorry.
And this is presumably 2 mana to activate that.
Yeah, he can activate the Retrofitter, he could have any number of spells, but yeah, are just going to pop the vacuum here. Feels like we need to stop the bleeding to an extent. This at least keeps him from attacking with the Sculler. Obviously, well, he doesn't have cards in his graveyard for the frog, but he could at any point, basically. Oh, that actually doesn't matter because these get flying tokens, so... Flying counters, rather. So, yeah, keeps him from attacking with the Sculler. Maybe nullifies a couple of attacks from the frog.
Right, but blocking the frog is awkward with Lurrus, mentioning that these cards are the cards, means they'll go back to the graveyard.
Correct.
They don't have a finality counter on them or anything.
Yep. So just any number of reasons that this board state is incredibly awkward for me.
Right. I mean, Tide Hollow Sculler having the path under it means like an answer to Sculler is an answer to something else as well, but
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every removal spell in the deck is incredibly live at this point. So
short of a call into like two good plays, feels like just gonna fall further and further behind.
yeah, and that's kind of where I mentioned the lack of like draw spells. Although Spurlock does not care about the 2/1 here.
Spurlock's
And
mana base also seems very ambitious.
yeah,
Looking at this,
has the Lurrus, I guess. So the thought of losing the skull are maybe not actually that distressing.
Yeah, he can redeploy before you have a chance to cast that path since you're tapped out at the moment. So
right, it feels like this is a block I'd want to wait until next turn to make, but maybe you have to make it now because Doth, if he just starts going in with Dothy alone next turn, you can't afford to take the
Right,
extra
exactly.
damage this turn.
Yeah, so those are just 1/1s. Although I guess those are both 1 power creatures normally, right? So I don't actually know how big the rabbit is.
I think you're right.
So get the Lurrus back, cast the Sculler. So this was the reason for the blocking of the Scullers. I did have this Daze, and if he didn't have another land, I could do this and keep my path,
nice.
which does work out. Although
Ish.
I do well as best as it could. Although I do wish I had picked up the Spars headquarters so that I could cycle it. But
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have like 3 potentially pretty important path targets here and only 1 path. So
right,
Yeah, that's why I said ish.
right,
yeah.
It's definitely the best of a lot of bad options, I think, or the best of a lot of bad scenarios, I should say. Accidentally untapping the Steam Vents, but we are definitely not paying too light for that, so it's gonna. We'll figure it out in a second, I promise.
This looks like you doing math, but really you're just biding your time on camera, I think.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, so here's the Iconoclast, which definitely helps, although the Voidwalker, an awkward spot for it. I just want to point out, too, that after I made that mention of Lurrus being super spooky, that the quality of cards that this deck has produced is just through the roof. We've got the Frog, we've got a Johnny.
Despite the shaky mana, the spells he put in his deck are quite powerful,
Yeah.
and if he gets to play them, I imagine he's going to win quite a lot of games.
Yeah, so Iconoclast is nice here. We know about the path. Here's a Fatal Push. Very rudely. And yeah, I'm just done after that.
Yeah, we could path one of those creatures, but the other 2 were going to be left trucking. And
Yep, more than enough. The Shadow on the Voidwalker mixed with the flying of the Frog. I could deal with one of them, but not the other. And
Right. If you had a few more cards in your graveyard, pathing the Voidwalker, and then maybe being able to escape the Flage,
yeah,
could have been an out for the next turn. But
yeah, I have to assume that my hand at that point was just the Path to Exile and then a land or two, because
there's also a chance that even making a servo, you might have been dead to the Frog, so maybe answering the Voidwalker wouldn't have worked, depending on how many cards Spurlock had to discard.
Yeah, I don't really remember.
Into game 2, at least have a turn 1 play with Thraven Inspector ready to rack that clue on 2, or maybe Hardcast Days. We saw it in game 1.
Spurlock, meanwhile, showed us a number of incredibly powerful 2-drops, so just deciding which one of those to play in this game on turn 2 here.
And I made fun of the double planes in his deck last game, but again, able to get a turn 2 Frog out, so not holding him back so far. Meanwhile, Prose's mana also cooperating, has all 3 of his colors. very early prison. No extra energy generation means that we gotta expect that's coming back eventually.
Yeah, I remember. I'm not sure which one it is, but I am 99% certain that I have a more permanent answer to that frog in my hand, but wanted to keep it around in case of something else.
Interesting. I wonder what it is because normally you want to save the prison since it's
Mm-hmm.
more of a temporary thing
Right.
for closing out the game.
Spurlock in the tank.
You do have your Ghost Vacuum again. Good tool against the Lurrus matchup. Have to imagine Spurlock sitting down for round one of playing his Lurrus deck. Can't have been too thrilled to see Ghost Vacuum both
Right.
games so far, even though he is up a game.
Dark Confidant, which in a Loris companion deck, not the spookiest thing to have in play.
Yeah, I made fun of Lurrus, but if Spurlock just has every 2-drop that's high value with it.
Right. And I mean, you get to have cards like Jackrabbit too, right? Which is a 2-drop, but like is also a fine late game cast and draw.
For sure. Prior to Jackrabbit, I remember Intrepid Adversary was a card I thought of
Mm-hmm.
similarly, but Jackrabbit's just way better in that spot.
All right, Dark Confidant immediately just producing heaters here.
Speaking of
So you
cards
be happy to
that
see that
cost
flipped.
more than
Yeah.
their CMC would imply, only takes 1 damage for Mind Twist. That's definitely going to be for more than 1 mana.
Right. So I believe what's happening here is I have 4 cards in my hand, but he's just gonna cast it for 3.
So cycling spars
Cycle
ahead of time.
and have the days again.
Did you have it on turn 2 when obviously it looked like a clue turn from the outside, but did you have days that turn as well?
I don't
Potentially.
remember if I had it turn 2. I do know that I had it before I cycled the land there, but I knew I was gonna do that anyways.
Hmm.
So I don't remember if it was there on turn 2 or not, and maybe the hesitation was considering if I wanted to daze it or just have this prison and other things. The other thing to keep in mind with that may have been a consideration with prison is that playing prison earlier does get it into my graveyard sooner for the treasure cruise and the flage of it all. Speaking of, so yeah, discarding the flage to the NT feels pretty good. Exiling Volcanic Island after I played a land for turn does not.
Hate to see it.
Yeah.
Needed that land to discard next turn to empty.
Winds of Abandon, another 2-drop that could be a 6-drop, I believe.
Yep. And I was talking about the CMC of Dismember in game 1, just all the cost fluctuations.
So I think he's just floating a mana off of this Saga.
Not the most impressive Urza Saga I've ever seen. I mean, getting Black Lotus, obviously, that's great, but we didn't make a single construct. I guess the Mind Twist being flipped off Dark Confidant really changed the plans he had going into that
Yeah.
turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Fears confirmed with the Black Lotus. Although a bit of a mind fart on his part, as I do have this Ghost Vacuum in play, but I definitely should have waited for him to cast this Lurrus. Because now he can just do something else with his turn.
Yeah, gave up the ghost a little too soon.
Yeah, and instead I'm getting Scullered here, which, okay, so I'm guessing that the plan was that this Static Prison would run out in time for me to play this Palace Jailer. But that is no longer the case.
Yeah, and he leaves you with Treasure Cruise with only 3 cards in your graveyard, one of which you definitely do not want to exile if you can avoid it. So,
For sure, I have to imagine the Treasure Cruise is getting discarded to the empty next turn.
Yeah, it's either discard the Treasure Cruise to NT if you draw something that matters, or you can discard the card that you draw and use it as fuel for the Treasure Cruise, although NT's going to get taken down here, so...
And him seeing how important the... Even though that puts you really high on cards in graveyard, because the Static Prison's going to your graveyard as well. You're almost at Flage.
This was him lamenting that he didn't attack, and I told him my creature was tapped. He should have just attacked. So I get attacked during my own upkeep. Yeah, so just going to spend all of the non-Flage cards here to cruise. Yeah, with the... I forgot about the prison dying, even after I had just mentioned that point a little bit ago.
Yeah, interesting.
Looks like Unexpectedly Absent. Can't tell what the other cards are. Okay, well, there goes the Unexpectedly Absent.
I think the last one is a path.
Okay. That would make sense here. Nice answer because it gets rid of the frog. Doesn't put it in the graveyard for Lurrus.
Interesting. I'd assumed we would be getting rid of the Tide Hollow Sculler.
Yeah,
not
either
putting
way.
it in the graveyard. And he doesn't have enough cards in graveyard to fly unless he discards something, which is maybe free.
Well, if we path the Sculler, we're jailering the frog next turn anyways.
Next turn, yeah. And like it's a bit of a commitment to get the frog through this turn prior to him drawing that Fatal Push.
Right.
And the Wings of Abandon that I guess we knew about. That's fair. Good point, Spurlock.
Yeah, kind enough to just keep the cards that I know about on the table. Commando pretty brutal here too. Wants to be done with the Ghost Vacuum. Don't particularly blame him.
Yeah, we get to get this Commando on the way out, but
I was a little
Lurrus
happy
is
that
free
he
to
didn't
rule.
just take the Chrome Mox here, but the Vacuum is not great for me either.
Yeah, I would immediately path the Sculler.
I don't know that I'm on board for this Chromox and Path on this turn line. Battle Shieler feels like you are never keeping the Monarch in this game. Am I crazy for that?
Spurlock's played this turn in such a way that kind of gives us that option, though, because I guess you're right.
I mean, I guess he had wins, but like him drawing Fatal Push makes it worse for us this turn as well. So like, because he hasn't played anything now for 2 turns, right? So like in theory, if we make this line, we jailer the frog and just sit. I mean, he can win spot through for a turn.
My other point here is that if we just don't play the Chromox, we can still untap and then Path and Palace Jailer in the same turn.
Sure.
Like you take a hit, but if you can take that hit, then you still have Absent in your hand, which you can't use on the following turn, but maybe it's good at some point in the game, you know? Like, I'm not sure we needed to do that turn, and I guess it seemed pretty costly to do so.
That's a strong point. Being at 10 versus 12 here isn't that much of a difference.
Right.
I do think Spurlock using the Cathar Commando at the point where he did was odd, considering that he was going to get a hit with Frog, and doing it second main phase doesn't seem like it would have made a difference, because he ended up using the Fatal Push on your blocker right after the Cathar Commando play, so...
Fun fact, I was digging through here's the Winds of Abandon. I was digging through the token pile earlier because I realized that I had forgotten to get my Palace Jailer Monarch token, and then got up to go get it, and still just did not use it here. So gets the frog back after he attacks.
Takes the Monarch. Okay, same position as last game.
Yeah.
Ancestral into 2 good cards.
We do... Oh, no, we're 1 short of Flage cards, I believe. Because it was the only card left in the graveyard after Treasure Cruise. But we drew something.
Yeah, I mean, if it's anything that goes to the graveyard, like if we draw any spell.
Okay, so Prismatic Ending. Yeah.
A really
That
good
will
one,
do it.
too. So this turn is kill both of your creatures and have a 6/6 in play. That's a pretty good turn. That's the kind of thing you need to get back into this game for sure.
Yeah, so I am going to play the Flage, but I'm pretty sure this Flage is just going to go upstairs because he's at 7.
Oh, interesting. I don't like that.
I think it's really... I'm at 13. I don't really care about this Dark Confidant. If it draws him almost any spell, it puts him in a spot where Flage attack just kills him.
If your Flage gets to attack again, that's
sure.
Certainly true.
Yeah, so after Bob, use the Bobble.
Yeah, but Flage surviving to get to make an attack, you're already going to be in such a commanding position, whereas we know it's unlikely to kill him off his Bob trigger because he's a Lurrus deck, and if he has an answer to Flage, you're just so far behind, leaving Bob in play to take the Monarch. Did you draw a card off? Or no, he still had the Monarch.
He still has the Monarch.
Okay. Then I guess it's slightly more reasonable, actually, because he wouldn't be taking the Monarch.
Yeah, so he was asking very briefly about how Squad would work with this Securiton Squadron, and I informed him that it would work the way he wants it to. So there is 1 weenie squadron and 2 chunky ones.
4/4s, right?
4/4s, yeah. They have 3 counters each on them. Which... Oh, he's showing this Hallowed Fountain. That was the Mishra's Bauble card that I saw. He's not playing this.
So now I'm happy that Dark Confidant is in play.
Mm-hmm.
Now it seems like your way to win is to hit him for 3, let your Flage get blocked down, and maybe he dies to Dark Confidant. Although Ancestral changes that, or could change that. Yeah, ooh, I see 2 more points of burn.
Fire Ice, yeah.
All right, well, this one's wrapped up.
Yeah, so I waited on this because in my dumb head, the situation that is impossible, which is him having Solitude, was a thing. But that is not a card that he can play in his deck, so... yeah, just made him line up these blocks and do all this. And
yeah, I suppose everything I was just saying about Flage, letting him die to his Dark Confidant maybe makes no sense, because obviously you just block with Dark Confidant like he's doing here.
Well,
so
no, because if he blocks with 2 creatures, you can just deal all the damage to the Securitron Squadron.
Can
oh,
you?
Sure.
I thought you couldn't. I thought you couldn't deal more than lethal to a creature. He actually asked me that question before he blocked, and I told him I thought that you had to deal lethal damage. Anyway, here's a turn 1 Black Lotus.
Whoa, and a big rabbit.
A big.
That's
rabbit.
a real big rabbit.
Yeah.
We're gonna need Plains Path to Exile on this first turn, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can survive like a couple hits from that guy.
I probably could if I had delayed Blast Fireball.
Yeah, I was gonna say with a Wrath in your deck somewhere to draw 2 maybe, but we did not get one. Okay.
Decent start to it. So
Both have your power.
I would prefer his.
Yeah, well. Oh, Chromox on white?
So this Chrome Mox, I can tell you right now that I'm looking at a hand that features a fourth Earlingus, an unexpectedly absent, and no other sources of white mana.
Brutal.
So
Hmm.
so I exiled this spell seeker because I have cast my call and my fourth Earlingus is in my hand. But I definitely should have just swallowed it and exiled the fourth Earlingus here because the unexpectedly absent, even after one attack, if I get to cast it, is really helpful. But instead, I just have this Chrome Mox that makes blue mana.
Sure. I mean, I feel like my temptation would be to put a double white spell under it when you have no white sources. But
Well, the issue is that that's the only removal spell I have in my hand. I'm pretty sure at least. So there was no way I was going to be able to cast the unexpectedly absent on turn 2 without exiling the fourth.
the fourth, yeah.
And I didn't even do anything with the Chrome Mox anyways. I'm pretty sure I just cast it so I didn't have to discard to hand size. And
Yeah.
I naturally drew the second white source, which would have let me unexpectedly absent here, which certainly doesn't solve all of the problems.
It would have been step one.
It would have been a lot better than this Jackrabbit continuing to exist.
Yeah, and fourth Earlingus looks pretty impotent on a board with 5 creatures on turn 2, you know?
I mean, they do trample, so like the 1/1s don't really block it well, although his 1/1s are just attacking every turn anyways, so like doesn't really matter, but so just have this unexciting Inti. And here's everybody's favorite frog. Although not currently castable.
Yeah, though in game 2, Spurlock did show a couple more duels. We see a scrubland here, so his mana is maybe not as bad as game 1 made his mana appear to be, maybe.
Right. So yeah, to say we're up against it here would be, I think, an understatement. So yeah, going to block a rabbit.
Ooh, we tapped out on rabbit tokens already.
Yeah.
Seems like maybe we should print more of those guys.
Here is shameful post-combat Guide of Souls.
Oh, no.
Realizing, yeah.
You could have flown one of them right away.
Yeah. You just fly the Jackrabbit, right? And get a ton more of them.
Yeah, the next turn.
Oh,
You have to. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm fairly certain the reason that I blocked a rabbit and not the Jackrabbit, A, because I didn't want my Inti to die, because that's an attack trigger, I believe, and B, because I really wanted to use it to draw cards this turn.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, you're looking for anything that can get you out of this.
I mean, I'm not sure that there is anything that gets me out of this at this point, but the only way to find out is to find out. So, Path, not the worst card I could have flipped here.
Yeah,
Well,
it's going to let him
no.
find a basic island.
Yeah. You're going to solve one problem and create another one immediately.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't pair well with this.
Yeah, not the most embarrassing turn you could have had here.
Yeah, and while giving him the island is bad, I'm not sure that is even something that would have been on my radar for a reason not to do this, because there's definitely no way that I think we can ever let that rabbit attack again.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even have the option to wait until his upkeep for Path with the Steel Cutter, so. Dude, Night's Whisper, that card does damage to him twice.
Yeah, but unlike the other games, you haven't gotten in for any early damage here, so the 2 damage. I mean, I think it's going to be a while before he even would cast that anyway.
Yeah.
That's interesting. If he doesn't play a fourth land here, I would consider casting Night's Whisper instead of the Frog, hoping to find a black source.
Well,
I think you have to. So like that Jackrabbit lived for how many turns? So like he has to assume that I just can't kill this frog, right? And
also you would
Yeah,
be
just
guessing what color source you're gonna draw, right? Because you can leave up, or no, yeah, you can only leave up the blue. So if it's not
Yeah.
black, you can't
well,
cast the frog.
he looked heavier black than anything else to me. I mean, he had what 3 swamps in play game one, or
mm-hmm.
2 of them
uh,
in a Dark Slick Shores.
yeah. I don't know. I just want to try and use more of my mana every turn, but I mean, just casting a Psychic Frog, no one's gonna get mad at you for that, except maybe your opponent.
I was sad. I wasn't mad.
Also, like, Prose actually represents a decent ability to maybe deal damage on this turn if he gets to cast 2 spells, trigger prowess a couple of times, give something trample. Like, he could actually come in for a lot of damage out of nowhere if Spurlock isn't playing a creature. Like, if he doesn't play a creature and instead pays 2 life, like, that could get a little bit dangerous, actually. Corey Steel, Cutter, and Inti.
Yeah.
No,
That's
So-
true. That's true.
The game 1 Flage Gambit, I think, was a good one. The turn with the path. This Flage Gambit, I do not think is a good one. So the case here is that I have Flage and I have Burst Lightning in my hand, and he has 4
billion
cards in
cards.
hand. So, I Flage and I target the frog. So, like, my thought here is that this ends up with him having to discard his entire hand to save the frog, which, like, on one hand makes me seem smart, but on the other hand, this frog is just going to kill me after he does
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
so
it's just
like,
lethal.
You're going to be very smart and very dead at
Yeah.
the same time.
which I mean, I guess in theory is true either way. I mean, he can always discard these cards to the frog to just kill me. So,
Oh, wait, you hadn't gained the 3 yet. So you are going to be able to maybe live. Do you have enough blockers? Oh, he's going to have 2 cards to discard to the frog, though, because of Bob.
Yeah. So like while it is like kind of a dumb way to do it, I guess the outcome is really the same either way, which is that if this frog lives this turn, the game was over
You
anyways.
don't.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think if you aim the Flage at the Guide of Souls, the Burst Lightning at Dark Confidant, leave things back to block the rabbits, he can't lethal you with the
Well,
frog, and the next turn you just get to cast the Flage again, right?
I think that if I was going to do this, and this line of discarding a card to Inti was something I was willing to do, I should have led on the attack with the equipped guy, because then if he blocks with the frog, I have enough damage to kill it either way. So, because he can't block it now because it essentially has 1 toughness left, so like he's definitely not blocking. But in a world where I attack with it first and it's a 3/3, maybe he blocks with the frog because he has, you know, a million cards in his hand. And then the Flage and Burst Lightning get to take it out. But as is, we didn't do that, so
One odd thing about your play last turn, you shouldn't have moved the Steel Cutter onto the new Monk, I don't think. I think you should have left it on the one it was on before. Oh, no. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Is if I was willing to do this attack and discard a card with Inti, I should have attacked with the Monk that was already in play before I played any of those cards. Because, I mean, maybe he just doesn't block, I guess.
Well, you can make the Monk and not move the Steel Cutter.
I'm just,
onto
yeah.
that.
Yeah. I do think that eventually I want the Steel Cutter where it is because, I mean, for whatever it's worth, that Monk is now a 2/2 instead of a 1/1. But, yeah, so we just end the game with this unexpectedly absent that I couldn't cast and the 4th Earlingus that I refused to exile to cast it and play. And now he's mathing and realizing that he can just kill me. And
Another weird side effect of that turn 1 decision that may not have actually mattered, but if your Chromox was white or red or both, this turn you could have attacked and discarded your Flage and then just like full cast it.
right.
But your mana was such that you couldn't. I mean, you could have like gone for that anyway and hoped the top card you flipped was a red or white source, but that, you know, obviously is pretty risky.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember if the planes was the draw for turn on my second turn, or if I drew it from Ancestral Recall. If I drew it on the
I
Ancestral Recall, it's like pretty unforgivable, I think, to not have exiled the fourth with the Chrome Mox.
I thought I saw that you did draw off the ancestral only because I'm pretty sure a mountain was the draw for turn the next turn,
Sure. Yeah.
based on the way it looked. But
In that
I
case,
could be
yeah.
mistaken.
Like I said, I mean, looking back, I think that is the like big hanging point of the whole game. But yeah, especially if the planes was drawn, I think not exiling the fourth was pretty heinous there, because obviously it doesn't fix the entire game, but just only getting attacked once with that rabbit, I think, changes basically the whole complexity from there, right? Like you have the path for the frog later. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
everything is very different. So
You even have a spell seeker that can go find the path because you didn't imprint that, right?
right, exactly.
Well,
But
moving on from there, let's take a look at Spurlock's deck, as we'll be sticking with him going into the next match. We saw a lot of it between those games. A couple of things we didn't see. Didn't see Felia. Felia looks like it has some nice synergies with a couple of the cards.
mhm.
Lethal Schemes, another card on the long list that we were talking about of cards that's mana cost is incorrect, as often you want to be tapping a couple of creatures as you cast that.
Right. The Toxic Deluge is interesting, but I guess when you have Lurrus, and again, Lurrus is in the deck in this image, but is companioned. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I guess your Toxic Deluge doesn't feel quite as bad, especially I guess if you have something like a frog that survives it.
Right, and there are
But
some interesting spots where, like, with a Johnny in play, you could do it for one to flip your Johnny.
mhm. We
This
have
is just
Goblin
a
Bombardment at home.
fantastic Lurrus deck. I mean, we mentioned that he had all the good two drops, and then Joey pointed out that we never even saw Felia. There's also a
Or
Caustic
Kitesail
Mako and a
Freebooter.
Jace Prodigy and a Kitesail Freebooter. I mean, what more could you want? You even have the Lotus for the absurdly busted Lotus Lurrus turns.
Yeah, I mean,
The mana base is a little weak, as we pointed out. I mean, 9 basics in your fully 3-color deck is pretty rough. No fetch lands either.
We never saw Spars, or not Spars,
Rafines.
Rafine's Tower, I don't think, in any of those games. Rafine's, Seachrome Coast, Hollowed Fountain, he does have a decent number of duels, but as we were talking about, Prose's duels not quite lining up on the colors. We see kind of the same thing here, where the colors work out a little awkward, where he's playing a lot of swamps and plains, only one island, and playing 4 plains in your Psychic Frog deck.
Hmm.
Your Psychic Frog Dothi Voidwalker deck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But, if the mana works out, if he can, get around that early awkwardness, his spells are very powerful for the strategy.
Yeah, and I mean, we mentioned not wanting to really companion Lurrus anymore these days outside of Black Lotus, but this I think, is pretty close to the jackpot on that front.
And we're playing Urza Saga as well, just for the Black Lotus, so
Right.
it's more likely we can pair it with Lurrus.
Hey, you can make a really big construct with your Retrofitter Foundry.
Yeah, I would be
True.
really surprised to learn how much he gave up on in the draft to keep this Lurrus in his companion zone, but, it doesn't look like he's missing much. I think this deck is, we're not predicting records, but I'm going to predict a 3-0 for this guy. Like, wow, this deck looks great.
We talked briefly after the game, and he did tell me that Black Lotus was pack one, pick one, and I think Lurrus was his second or third pick, so he was in it from the gun, and obviously that makes it a lot easier to draft, right? Like when you don't have a lot of 3 and 4 drops that you have to talk yourself out of playing. When you just have it from the rip, you just get to I mean, Urza Saga and Retrofitter on first kind of jump out. I mean, Urza Saga gets Black Lotus at its worst, so not that bad, but Retrofitter Foundry seems a little out of place. But then you think about like Guide of Souls and Securiton Squadron, the constructs from Urza Saga. Just no complaints whatsoever here.
Well, let's see how the deck performs going forward. So, getting into this game, I ended up playing Spurlock in the second round, and I remembered about towards the end of the draft that all those blue-white cards that I was talking about really enjoying are actually cards that I ended up picking. So we'll see if maybe my evaluation on some of those cards was right or wrong. I had forgotten that was this draft that we were talking about because I'm way over on the other side of the table.
Mhm.
But
Do you remember right off how your first round went?
I believe actually based on the timing of the rounds, I was already 1-1 by the time we ended up playing, just through oddities of how this draft ended up playing out.
Yeah, this was
I
a 9-man
believe.
draft, so we didn't have our normal bracket. So I just wasn't sure what you were coming into this with.
Yes, I believe I was 1-1. I'm also on Esper, but I'm on a more mid-range to control side of it. I mentioned taking a lot of those blue-white control cards, paired them with a lot of the cards that you might imagine are in my deck. We've already seen out of Spurlock. A lot of the very efficient black removal spells. We'll have to wait to see what my black splash is for on that more blue-white control side.
All right, Retrofitter
This
into
is a spooky one
Securitron.
too.
Yeah, that is quite the way to start a game. All right, so you have March at least.
Yeah, but having to march right away at the start of the game, just immediately volunteering to go down a card, not a great place to be.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel good, but it probably feels better than a bunch of 2/2 tokens, so the price we pay, I guess.
My more controlling deck kind of needs to play from fairly even position. Like, it's hard for me to come back from a lot of incidental value, which Retrofitter Foundry prepares to do. Lurrus also represents that. So those are cards I need to answer very, very quickly. Otherwise, my 1-for-1 interaction is not going to be able to actually ever get me control
Right.
of the board. Urza Saga also represents like a lack of value if I'm not able to answer it. I remember specifically untapping or going to Spurlock's turn and being like, oh man, my March of Otherworldly Light, because that's such a good answer to Urza Saga.
Yeah, I was about to mention Lurrus was still companion. It was hanging out a bit off camera, it seems, but now it's in his hand, so.
Yeah, Saga goes to 2, and again, against me, just attacking for 2, passing, planning to activate is probably Spurlock's best move. I don't remember what's in my hand, but I'm probably hoping he casts something. Of course, he does not.
Yeah, he seems pretty comfortable to just sit on this Urza Saga, just trying to get more value out of the Securitron Squadron before
Right.
you interrupt that.
Yeah, we saw against Prose him choosing to be a little bit more aggressive with his mana, partially because of what was flipped off Bob. But here I have a decent answer in Witch Enchanter. Ended up drawing enough lands that I didn't need to play it as a land. But
Yeah, pretty good here, too. I mean, you're looking at a 3/3 construct with the token, but you don't.
You see me indicate both of his cards. I think at some point Spurlock gets confused and still thinks it's only a 2/2, even though I don't know. I don't remember exactly what the interaction was, but I remember there being a slight confusion. Obviously, that card has fluctuating power, and then it
Yeah.
has a +1/+1 counter. Like,
It is probably among the more annoying cards to keep track of a +1/+1 counter on, for sure.
and like Securitron Shrouded being an artifact is not something that matters for that card most of the time,
Right.
as well.
Yeah, I have to imagine looking here that a lot of this planning was done with the intention of having a Black Lotus this turn, which
Yeah, see, this Spurlock taking extra time to write his life total is, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, this thing did 3, not 2.
Joey, were you aware that Spurlock had the Black Lotus and that would have been coming had you not destroyed the Urza Saga, or did you not know that yet?
I did not know that. I knew that another construct plus an artifact was coming, which meant I would be facing down 4-5 power worth of them with the Securitron Squadron's help. So I just knew that I couldn't beat. Literally, I couldn't beat 1 mana do nothing artifact. 1 or 0. Like, if it was Darksteel Relic, I was in trouble, so.
Yeah.
Well, and you were further incentivized to kill the Urza Saga, given that he missed a land drop and then continued to, or failed to play a land on this next turn as well. So,
Well, I don't think he had missed it.
Yeah,
That
he hadn't missed
point.
it yet because I had just played my 4th land the turn before.
Yeah.
So.
Oh no! Wait, Spurlock was on the play.
Oh, no,
this
no,
game.
Spurlock was on the play.
You're
Spurlock was
right,
on the
yeah.
play, you're right.
okay. Glad I'm not crazy.
Yeah, there's like 7 different reasons that that Witch Enchanter was brutal.
Yeah.
But to answer your question in general, no, unlike Prose said for himself, I am not in that mind space of Lurrus meaning Black Lotus, like that being the ace pairing of them. Because I'm used to a version of Cube where Lurrus is actually a good companion and then it's just been on the downtick.
Sure.
I hadn't considered what the best case scenario was where it still wanted. So no, I was not aware of or thinking about the Black Lotus.
Well, I did find another land here. Still no blue mana.
Yeah,
But
and that No More Lies, importantly, exiling the freebooter, that kind of card is very good against me. We
Right.
know Spurlock has 2 of them because he also has the Tide Hollow Sculler. Here, unfortunate that I have to use this Dam. Like, it makes the freebooter such an awkward card for him to have cast last turn because obviously any other just creature I could untap and overload the Dam to wipe his board, but the freebooter would have taken the Dam, so I had to counter it, and then I only had just by the way the mana was going to work out, I needed to cast the Dam, have the mana leak there for the Lurrus, but still losing my 1 board wipe spell definitely meant there were combinations of this game where if he kept waiting on the Lurrus, I could have been in trouble. Luckily, played out with the 1 piece of information I knew being what he went with. And now I get to resolve Jace on an empty board, so just immediately brainstorming. Now, one thing that is on my radar is that Orcish Bowmasters cost 2 mana, so I am thinking on future turns I might act with my Jace in some other ways if he has 2 mana up. Especially with this many cards in his hand, I wouldn't expect him not to be able to deploy all of his mana. And Lethal Schemes is, I believe, the name of this card.
Yep.
The Convoke one we were talking about, that connives.
You said it didn't cost 4, and now here we are paying 4 mana for it.
True. Well, against me, it's going to cost 4. I can't let him keep any creatures
Yeah.
in play.
Yeah, probably not the reason that the card is played, but a nice side effect for him that he can take out the Planeswalker with it.
I feel really good in this position. Seeing the Jace in the graveyard tells me he's missing one of his colors. We're also in getting towards the late game, and I'm the control deck, so I feel pretty good there. He has 2 removal spells in hand, which are not good, or 3 removal spells in hand, which are not good in this matchup, typically. Here, I'm presenting a creature, but like, if he uses a removal spell on it, it's just the Spirit from Staff of the Storyteller.
Do you remember at this point, I don't know how many cards you have in your hand. I mean, this Psychic Frog has to seem a little bit spooky, unless you have something to handle it.
I remember feeling like it and Dothy were both spooky, and I believe I had an answer to either of them. I can't remember what the answer was or why I thought Dothy was spookier. I think at 9, like, Dothy represents lethal fast enough on its own that if I didn't have a removal spell, maybe I would take it over the frog, especially since I have a flying blocker, even though blocking, he has 3 removal spells in hand. I'm not actually going to be able to block the frog.
He may not actually be getting better value than getting rid of that Spirit token.
So I did pause a little before casting this brainstorm because, again, I was like, if that's a Orcish Bowmaster, I might just lose to that.
Yeah, that was kind of why I asked about the removal, because, you know, if you see that Psychic Frog and you don't have anything in your hand to deal with it if he does draw blue mana, that seems like the kind of thing that could definitely kind of force your hand over the next turn or two, because I don't think you ever want to get to the point where that resolves without you having something to deal with it already.
I mean, the same is true of the Void Walker, and the Void Walker is castable, whereas the Frog is not. So I think, truthfully, that probably makes the difference.
Right.
Like, they are both scary. One of them is immediately castable and just would kill me in 3 turns.
Here's curtains, so I guess this is a way to get rid of the frog, although there's just no way.
Yeah, I know it's not going to. But this is a spooky play on my side. Like,
Yeah,
I'm the control
not
deck.
paying 3 mana for it.
I'm the control deck. I understand that he doesn't really need to care about his life total much, but come on.
Maybe it's just a power move. Oh, it's not. Okay.
It's a 3/1.
I guess he still could have played 2 for it, but maybe doesn't want to get.
I think if I have a removal spell in response, like he has the Fatal Push, I now know, but if I have
Sure.
something, he wants to be able to at least trade it for the staff.
The staff, that makes sense, yeah.
And like him paying 2 mana for that very unlikely scenario maybe still feels correct
Right.
and worth it.
For sure.
So here, 4 mana
The
for
Emperor.
the Wandering Emperor. Yeah, here knowing his hand is huge for me to be able to make this play. I go for this, knowing he's going to use the staff. Use it to kill the staff. Actually, knowing his hand maybe doesn't affect it that much. In my head, getting to do this on my turn... I don't know,
Yeah, I mean,
actually.
knowing that you have nothing to worry about maybe helps. Oh, there is the blue source.
Right.
A slow one.
And now, like, the spirit becomes an actual threat, so he has to use... maybe not on this attack, like, I'm not saying he needs to snuff out here, though it looks like maybe he's getting ready to, but the spirit is actually going to matter. He's already used kind of a card to answer the staff, so gives me a little bit of value, and here's the One Ring.
I think, yeah, I think with this One Ring, you for sure need to maybe snuff out here, maybe not.
I actually don't like that I cast the One Ring there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think maybe attack first.
Especially since he just showed blue mana. Like, I kind of wish that I had saved it to get protection on the next turn, because we now know he's going to cast Frog Nets turn, so maybe that speaks to me already having a removal spell for the frog and just, like, trying to look...
Like I said before, or the opposite, where you don't have an answer to this frog, and you know that you're going to have to find it.
Sure, but then having protection on this next turn would be nice,
Yeah.
instead of wasting protection on the turn where he doesn't have any creatures in play. So, maybe should have waited until this turn to cast the ring.
One Ring on 5 life when you cast it has me constantly thinking, like, okay, how many ways do I have to reset this ring or get rid of it? Do you have a lot in your deck?
I have a couple of ways to bounce it to my hand, and I have a couple of ways to gain life. Wandering Emperor in play gains incidental life. So I have a few different ways to play through my One Ring. I did so in the match that I won. It involved resetting my ring, I think twice actually, against Junker.
I have to imagine that your ideal plan revolves more around just not getting to 5 life before you cast the One Ring, you know?
Very true. Ooh, another piece of incidental life gain. I think we're
Yeah.
going to see that here, because there's a polluted delta in my yard from when I fetched the Shadowy Backstreet. So I get to get that back, pay 1 life to sack it, but then gain 2 off of the Sarah's Paragon. So effectively 1 life gain, make it a little bit bigger. And Spurlock, he paid all that life that he maybe didn't need to. Here's one of my pieces of life gain, giving it to Spurlock instead, though.
Yeah, 5, going to 3.
Yeah, I have 2 ways of bouncing it in my deck as of this moment. So I know he has a removal spell in hand and nothing else. So as long as I can find one of my bounce spells, which drawing for turn, then drawing 3 cards off ring, I'm checking my graveyard right there just to make sure none of my ways to bounce it or gain light, like checking how many of my outs are still in my deck to reset the ring to know whether or not I can afford to draw 3 here. Maybe since I'm not looking to gain life, I believe the count is 10 here. Yep, I even showed the camera that it's 10. Draw 3. And then...
I'd be really curious to see the makeup of your hand before this, because looking at Winds of Abandon and a Fate and an unknown card that like wasn't a creature, obviously,
I definitely think I should have waited one more turn to get
Yeah.
one card deeper
Right.
before doing this. But knowing that I'm at 10, like, there's a little bit of, well, I need to end this game, so if I don't get out from under my own ring before, very soon.
Are your bounce spells instants?
One of them is.
Okay. Well, I just because if they're instants, you can draw 3.
And
okay, yeah.
here I unfortunately drew 6 cards on my turn, or 7 cards in total on my turn, 6 after the count of 10, and none of them were my ways to return it. Though Cryptic Command, which is one of those ways, was no longer viable because I had to use too much of my blue mana to cast that Mystic Confluence. So I was on a 2-outer when I drew 3 on 10. I was on a 1-outer when I drew 3 on 7 cards in library. So should have just waited one more turn. Instead, I died to my own ring.
Well, I think the consolation there is that it wouldn't have mattered, right, with all those cards you get deep. But
So I would have gotten one
here,
card
but...
deeper because I would have drawn a card on my next turn before doing both of those things.
Oh, sure,
so
yeah.
There is every chance. But that also would be the turn that he gets to deploy his frog again, so then I'd be under a little bit of threat.
Yeah,
Love getting to exile this again 2
Right.
games in a row.
Yeah, if you didn't have the confluence already, then
Yeah, that I can't remember. Whether it was part of the 3 that I drew off of the ring or not. But here,
Ooh, a turn 3 Rafine.
yeah. My deck can't get aggro too easily, and speaking of having to bounce my own permanents, and would want my other match, I had to bounce my own Rafine, I believe. But Rafine on an empty board, I can start getting pretty aggro pretty fast. Actually dealing some damage.
And you have to imagine that Spurlock has sideboarded out at least some of his removal.
And some of his removal doesn't work on Rafine, because it's
like, black, so no snuff out.
Fatal Push, he has to get online, which we haven't seen much ability for him to get it online himself. And knowing he has Fatal Push in his deck, I could maybe play around it because it costs 2 mana to Fatal Push because of the Ward 1, so it is like a cost for him to leave up the ability to Fatal Push it. This is a really hard discard. I remember my hand was very good. I don't remember any of the contents of my hand. I remember it was stacked, and I think...
Looks like
an Inquisition.
Yeah.
Yeah. That discarding Inquisition against the Lurrus deck should tell you how stacked my hand was. And here, just going to cut down the Bob. Because again, he can't Fatal Push me here if that's his removal spell because of the Ward 1. I'm 1 attack away from getting out of Dismember range, which is one of his other removal spells. We mentioned that Snuff Out doesn't work. So there's several removal spells from Spurlock that I know about that wouldn't work on Rafine. So
giddy up.
Excited to have it. Yeah. Another Bob. And this Sculler, I accidentally flash him. I think that was Mystic Confluence, which is not one I love for him to know about, but also like very hard for him to play around.
It was just nice of you. He didn't get to resolve his Sculler, so you gave him a sneak peek at what he might have seen, you know?
I've now countered both sculling effects, so as long as Lurrus doesn't come down, my hand is safe.
Lurrus still in the companion zone, looks like, up there, peeking out. Didn't sneak into the hand. I guess it'd probably be face up on the table if it did, so. Not sure what that one was. Looks like a blue spell.
Yeah, maybe it was the Mystic Confluence, though I can't imagine I discarded it, but maybe because he knew about it, I discarded it.
It definitely doesn't have enough text to be Mystic Confluence. I'm going to
let Is it just the Mana Leak that was cast?
No, I discarded something just now.
Could be like Brainstorm or something.
Rafine has a second counter. It could be Brainstorm, that's true. Again, I talked about in game 1 thinking, oh, maybe his deck has the...
Past Joey doing us no favors and moving it even further off of camera now.
Me thinking he has Orcish Bowmasters may be the reason to discard a Brainstorm, even though, if that's what that was, getting back an island here off of the Paragon island that I discarded earlier to something. or no, I surveilled it off of that shadowy back streets. That's probably what happened.
Lurrus has entered the hand.
This feels like a much more happy time game state for you than basically anything that happened in game one.
Yeah, I feel way ahead. I mean, I felt way ahead in game one too. Like I was like between the Wandering Emperor and Oust, you saw that I had life gain in hand, but I ended up not getting the life gain off the Wandering Emperor because he got to activate it on Staff of the Storyteller, and then I had to oust his frog, so I didn't get any of the life gain off of that. Sarah Paragon only gained 1 life last game off of the Polluted Delta, so.
Getting to Connive 2 here. That's a big Rafine.
Yep.
What is that thing? It's a Sphinx demon or something?
Yeah, all of the leaders are demons
Yeah.
from that set.
Very colorful type line. So we know about Lurrus, but just gonna hit the Confluence. Hard to imagine a reason to keep playing this game unless we get a way to take something out. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a slight stall on my cast of Confluence because I was considering if it was worth bouncing his guy, but his guy was potentially going to deal him damage, and I had lethal, so.
Well, here's Black Lotus again. It's very rude when he does this in game 3, huh?
Yeah, on the play, game 3, gets to finally resolve a Sculler against me.
Although nothing you
have
could
2
have done
white
about it
cards.
regardless, but
And no white mana.
Yeah, this was one of those, oh no, I can't believe you're going to get to see my hand. I'm embarrassed.
And he has a Dark Confidant.
Dark
Wow.
But I'm going to
Follow
rip a
up,
planes
yeah.
here, and he's going to know about it. Ooh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, this definitely is good for you, but your hand is a Mystic Confluence in 3 lands.
Yeah, but I got that Mystic Confluence in hand, so if I can just play out, like, his deck isn't that fast, so that Mystic Confluence can get me back into the game by answering the Sculler, and then everything will be all good. Ooh.
Answering the
Unlucky.
Sculler, huh? Which one? Which one?
And at this point I say, you know my hand's lands, I'm picking it up.
Yeah, just absolutely brutal, and I mean,
So the early game, clearly going to Spurlock here. Do we have hope? Do we have outs to draw to here?
we have
In
Dam.
my position, yes. Because that I'm playing a control deck. Targeting a creature, which is all you're asked to do against Phantasmal Image, feels pretty easy to do. And as soon as I start to unlock these 2 cards in play, I feel ahead against Spurlock's deck because of how powerful both of these cards are against what Spurlock's doing.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, if you just get the, I think you probably go, maybe, well, now especially maybe go after the original first. You just get that out of the way with like Oust or something.
depending on
and
what
then-
my effect is, yeah. Like
Yeah.
if I draw something that has the ability to target but not destroy, then obviously have to go after the image first.
Right.
But Lotus allowed him to cast his maybe difficult to cast in his deck Tide Hollow Sculler on turn 1 and Frog here, just making mana fixing easy for his deck as well in this game. So definitely look behind, but I remember feeling kind of fine. I don't know if I think I have 2 unknown cards in hand, and now potential to be 3 unknown cards. I don't remember exactly their quality. Warren Revealed, essentially
Warren
getting to
Revealed,
discard
yeah.
a land to get a counter.
This feels like an important turn for you to try and stem the bleeding here.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
and there
so-
we go.
But that doesn't even do anything. We can just replay that.
Yep.
Which, I mean, it does eat a turn, I guess, but
No, you're right. You're 100% right. You can just replay the Sculler.
well, no, I mean, I'm saying that, you know, it keeps him from playing Black Lotus and doing something else obscene, I guess, but it's not like you're not going to do it. You're just going to not activate your Witch Enchanter when you play it.
Spurlock tanking here. I have to imagine that casting the Sculler has got to be part of his plan because he doesn't want his board wrathed.
Yeah.
So now we see that it is just the dam and another land in hand. So we're going to need some more help off the top here. Luckily, we get 2 draws to do it, or potentially 3 even.
Yeah, but he has no attacks.
Yeah, he can't attack with the frog
Yeah.
unless he wants to risk discarding the card in his hand, which have to assume is an interactive spell, I would think. Although maybe
And
if
it doesn't
was, he would
even
have
get
cast
him
it.
very far. Like, it keeps his frog from not dying, but it's not like he threatens the Rafine at all either.
Well, the Rafine was tapped that turn.
Oh,
he
sure,
could've-
sure.
If I had blocked with Witch Enchanter, he could have discarded his card, and then because of that, maybe I don't block because it is such a good blocker for his 3 other creatures in play. So maybe he should have attacked with the frog under the assumption that I can't block. That's maybe an interesting discussion. We know my card in hand going into this turn was just an island, but I get to draw 2 cards here off of this attack. Targeting the Witch Enchanter for the Connives. And I'm just looking for anything to unlock my cards from under the Scullers.
Looks like we've been to land alongside an Elspeth there.
Yeah. And here, cut down.
There we go. Do
So-
we have the second white source?
Well, I discarded
Yes,
the
we
island.
do. Yes, we do.
Okay.
And now I feel way ahead.
Yeah,
he has one
I mean,
mystery card, and he gets to take the first turn, but I have this Mystic Confluence in hand.
I was going to say this game looks kind of unlosable from this position. I mean, it depends on, Spurlock's card in hand and top of his deck here, but what's the scariest thing he can play here?
Yeah, both. I guess he hasn't played the Kite Sail yet this game, right? So Kite Sail would be the card that fully deflates me in that moment. It still feels inevitable that I would be able to answer the Kite Sail and again get my card back.
Yeah, and he does, find 2 threats to play, but, he
laments that he should not have done this right here.
Yeah. He could have just played both on his main phase and not worry about that Mystic Confluence. I mean,
Yeah.
it can still bounce the creatures, but, then you can play them again, so. Interesting.
This I'm real sad to see though.
Yeah. Learned his lesson with his last instant speed card.
And it flips Urza Saga, which he didn't even need to hit another land for those 2 types, so he gets 3 spirits off of 1 card. I mentioned how his go wide element is hard for me to answer, and Dam is already gone. So this is the moment where, I had felt like I was taking back control, and this is the moment where I'm like, uh-oh, now I got more work to do.
Occult Epiphany.
I don't think I've ever seen an Occult Epiphany as the last card in hand be cast before. That was... I'm not even sure I would have thought of playing it there. I was like, I just have to wait and, play it next turn and keep the best card of the top 4 or whatever, but that's impressive.
He did it for 3 and got 3 tokens off of it, so it was also kind of best case scenario. Here I take 1 going to 9, so unlike game 1 where I was at 5 at the start of the ring stuff, here I'm at 10, and I haven't played any of my cards that bounce it yet. I haven't played any of my cards that gain life yet. I am facing down a decent board, unlike the position in game 1 where I cast the ring. Again, probably a turn too early, and once activated it a turn too early in game 1. But if I can answer these creatures in play, I've much more life to work with this time.
Yeah. Yeah, Cult Epiphany is a card that I've recently gained a lot of respect for. I had it in a deck a few weeks ago, and yeah, just...
Would you believe that in yesterday's, as of recording this, yesterday's LSV video, he said that the person that curates their powerful cube, the one with initiative and all that, wants to cut Occult Epiphany from that cube.
I mean,
I think it's defensible. I don't think the card is a top 50 or anything, but I think it's better than I
was
thought
surprised when I heard that. I think it's really good and really flexible, which seems important to me, but they cube a lot more than we do, so
here I realize I have made a mistake, and this is not Mystic Confluence, this is Cryptic Command. I only get to choose 2 modes. I had kind of been counting on 3 modes, if I'm honest.
So you wanted to counter tap and bounce your ring, I'm guessing?
And bounce my ring. And now having to decide only 2 of those things is bad.
Well, it seems pretty easy, right? Because you can't tap his creatures, bounce your ring, and then let this mind twist go off and risk losing the ring.
Well, I actually think maybe I can. I'm up so many cards. Like, he's only taking 3. I'd have 5 cards in hand, so I'd still have 2 cards in hand. I actually think that's maybe a defensible choice. Okay. So there I lose Sarah Paragon, which is one of my ways to gain life.
And you went with bounce a spirit and tap his creatures?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. That wasn't even one of the things I thought I was considering. Yes, that is apparently what I went with.
Oh.
I guess the idea being that my hand, again, was good. This is another reason why I think bouncing the ring would have been fine. Because if I can just answer his creatures in play and not die to my ring, I will win the rest of the game because I have so many cards because I've had the ring in play for several turns. So I need to answer these last 3 creatures. Cryptic Command answered one of those creatures while also fogging the other 3.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is that maybe we have an answer for the Skydiver, but
Spurlock immediately after the game told me how bad this play was.
Yeah, it's wild to not bounce your One Ring here.
Especially since I have 4 mana to recast it for the protection effect. I hadn't considered resetting the ring and not tapping it. I hadn't considered not resetting the ring and not tapping it. And I mentioned that I had 2 bounce effects. Cryptics in the graveyard and now Teferi's on 1 counter, able to get attacked for lethal if he wants, or he could kill the Jace. But I've given up my abilities to tap the ring, so now I have to life gain my own ring, which is a brutal position.
I think the most impressive thing about that whole spiel you just gave is that I could hear your head and your hands from here.
Yeah, that's where it is. That's where it is. It's also, thankfully, blocking the view of what's happening. And he very intelligently attacks me because my ring trigger is going to put me down to 2. I don't know if that's the correct play.
Well, I mean, what do you do? Because Teferi can't bounce it. He can Jace bounce your guy, I guess, but like...
Well, the question is, do you kill Jace and just assume the ring will kill him over 2 turns, or do you give him the 1 more brainstorm to try and dig for it? And, you know, it kind of sounds to me like you're supposed to kill Jace there, but I respect the bravado of just saying, nah, you.
I mean, it becomes a question of how many effects can he have to reset this ring. I mean, Spurlock's at 12, so...
So here I do a count, and an interesting thing happens here where I ring before brainstorming because it obviously gets me deeper into the deck. However, one of the cards that would save me if the ring was on 3 was the top card of my library. But now that it's on 4, that card no longer saves me. I forget what it was, but I remember, yes, Wandering Emperor, which would have gained me 2 life up to 4 by exiling his guy. But because I've tapped it now, I have to go deeper. And
it looked like Oust, but I don't think there's any way to combine those cards.
There is, because I can spend some amount of mana to cast the Wandering Emperor. I have 8 mana, and I don't think I've played a land yet this turn.
Well, but if you make a token with the Wandering Emperor, you can't gain life from
that is true. I need a creature from a different source, but I just drew 10 cards or something.
That is fair.
So here I'm finding which mana I want to use to cast the Wandering Emperor.
Yeah, because colors are not inconsequential here as well.
Yes. I am exiling his guy. Which, if he has a removal spell, maybe he should use... Oh, he can't. Because I have Teferi. I point that out because I notice him thinking about stuff. I'm like, don't reveal information to me. I have Teferi in play. Then 2 mana here. Yes, every spell I want to cast this turn cycle is white. Staff of the Storyteller.
So there's your creature from another source that you can now oust to gain 3 more life.
Plus on Teferi. Counter on Staff. Wish I had 1 more white mana. Maybe my
well, it looks like you haven't played your land yet, yeah.
Yeah. Here, maybe I remember that I have Teferi Plus going, so I don't need to oust right away. Oh, Concealing Curtain. I decide this is more worthwhile than activating the staff, because I think I'm going to deck myself, because every game I won, I was at danger of decking myself. You saw me draw to 4 cards in library in the first game where I thought I was going to win. Here,
Yes, we're ousting the
yeah, and
Spirit.
he immediately just drew and passed his turn, so that's what timing we're in now. We're in Spurlock's instep. He can't respond, he can't do anything. I gain 3, going up to 7.
Yeah, but to your point, how do you win from here?
This is all a very good question. Teferi is on 2 going up to 3. If I can survive one more
turn cycle, yeah,
then Teferi can bounce the ring.
Yeah, and you do have, some amount of pressure here to, take down Spurlock before you deck yourself if you can answer this ring problem as well.
I do have, I think, exactly 3 or 4 cards. I know it's either 3 or 4 cards currently in my library, which means that through some combination of activating Jace, I can see every card in my library this turn, I believe. Off of Staff. Yeah, it's Staff to go to 3 cards in library. Jace Brainstorm, go to 0 cards in library, put 2 cards back. So if there is an answer, I have found it.
Ooh, but now I'm not sure you have enough time to actually kill Spurlock.
No, he does.
Do answer.
Because we can transform the curtains. He has exactly enough turns if he transforms the curtains and then puts counters on it with the Wandering Emperor.
I also have
you hit him for 4,
Drowner
then 5, then
deck.
6.
Yeah.
And the Drowner actually helps me not deck through its activation of its ability during my upkeep, even on my own creatures.
Right.
Okay. Because I don't think that was enough just by itself, right? Because you hit him for 4 this turn down to 8, then 5 next turn, and then you can't draw a card. You have 2 cards left in your library.
2 cards left, so he would draw.
Yes, you get one more. Yeah.
Fairy would draw me a card.
Sure.
Oh yeah, if that's the way you have to bounce your ring, then you don't have enough time. But if you had another spell that did it,
Flood Pit Drowner would actually do it, but Flood Pit Drowner requires him to have a creature in play because it has to target a creature an opponent controls. So if he just drew and passed through the turn where I would deck myself, maybe I don't have an out to not decking myself. But in a different match, my second match against Junker, Flood Pit Drowner looping infinitely off of, or not infinitely, I guess, but enough off of the creatures he had in play to allow my flyers to kill him ended up mattering for how that game resolved.
Very nice. All right.
But at any rate, Spurlock managed to withstand the ring for long enough, and he is now going to be battling for the 3-0.
Couple unfortunate misplays, but we get to see Spurlock all 3 matches here. So let's take a look what we have next. So playing against JT here. Looks like maybe on a similar deck to Prose, as I'm seeing white, blue, and red cards.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of the cards that we talked about, specifically the artifact cards, made it to JT. So
surprised how much I kind of like all the decks we've seen, and all 4 of them are playing blue-white combination.
Yeah. Retrofitter into a Johnny, not a 1/2 that you see every day, but
I said we saw 3 colors of cards in JT's hand. I'm pretty sure I've also seen a mountain in his hand, yeah, but still only deploying island so far, so missing his white mana for his exclusively white spelled hand.
Right. He has islands in a mountain and white spells, so I believe this was off of a mulligan as well, so
yeah, and Spurlock already had to deal with one of his opponents drawing their planes off the top right away, so it seems only right that he doesn't have to deal with it this time too.
Spurlock dig in. I was going to say perhaps for a 3rd land, but he did have Urza Saga in hand already, so just taking the turn off to draw 2 cards, see what his deck offers up.
Yeah, maybe trying to find blue mana, which he still hasn't found yet.
There is a white source, although it comes into play tapped one, but does leave the card on top of his library, so I have to imagine it's another white land or a blue spell.
Either way, something that probably lets him double spell next turn, because I feel like I'd be prioritizing getting multiple actions taken from JT's side after having to take off for a little bit.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, Retrofitter and Ajani are impressive cards, but not an insurmountable board here.
Yeah, not the fastest clock either.
Right. Spurlock's had his value draw with Retrofitter, Ajani, Dark Confidant, Knight's Whisper, Urza Saga, like all the cards that generate value for his deck, but not the aggressive ones.
Okay, there's swords for the Ajani. It's worth noting too that obviously Ajani, very good card regardless of this, but as far as we've seen, I believe Spurlock's deck does not have any red permanents that do set
No.
up the creature ability on the back. Not to discount that card even without it, but
Right, and he does have like some token synergies with the Securotron Squadron. He has Failure to Blink it. Obviously, good to get back with Lurrus. Like, plenty of things that make it worth being there still.
right, just reduces the clock that card can in some cases present.
So JT spent his turn casting 2 removal spells. Unfortunately for him, one of which was a portable hole, which Spurlock conveniently flashed in a. Oh man, forgot the name of that card.
Cathar Commando.
Thank you. So can get his Dark Confidant back kind of at will. And again, opts not to make a Saga token in favor of Mind Twisting, which was good enough for JT to concede.
Yeah, for sure. Especially just like sitting on all that blue mana every turn. Spurlock's gotta think that there's stuff in that hand worth getting rid of, and JT conceded after his draw, not able to see his way back in. Here, starting on a dual land for JT, so hopefully less mana issues this time around.
And in fact has all 3 colors on turn 2, just as he drew it up.
And is that a Fairy Mastermind getting ready
Believe
to come
so.
down?
Yep.
All right, so both players have a creature on turn 2. JT's the first to action on his 3rd turn here, so let's see what he can do. Looks like some juicy options in hand. I saw a Stock Up poking out there.
Stock Up swords.
Not a card I've gotten to cast yet, but I'm very jealous of everyone that does.
Yeah, nice new addition. Nice in this kind of back and forth, grindy looking matchup. Just getting his value the same way we saw Spurlock doing a lot of in game 1, though. Spurlock's going to have the ability to do the same on his turn, getting in with the Bronco, getting a free card off of it. But JT with a decent selection here.
Spurlock has an unimpeded attack with his Bronco here. I wonder if he can put a 3/3 creature into play first and saddle it.
Yeehaw.
Guide, maybe this is Cathar Commando? Oh,
Ooh,
Johnny.
Johnny, even better.
But Johnny,
Yeah, and then we can tap a couple guys here and saddle. That's how that works, right? Like group?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Big turn. Yeah, so JT taking 3 damage from combat and 2 additional from the reveal trigger.
yeah, and it felt like this was shaping up to be a value game as I was talking about it, but this turn, threatening to now have enough energy next turn to jump a guy, Winds of Abandon, to get a creature out of the way. Spurlock's all of a sudden hit the gas on the aggro side.
Now, JT does have at least a Swords to Plowshares in hand, so we can answer, one of these cards. Not quite sure the details on the rest of his hand, so I'm not sure if he has better plays to make this turn. But Spurlock definitely asked a lot of questions, all pretty quickly.
Yeah, this reminds me of the games against Prose where there were like multiple threats in play that needed to be answered. And maybe not the time. Ooh.
Now, balance is a good way
Interesting.
to even out this board state.
Yeah, I wonder if I would flip a Johnny here, because my brain immediately tells me to always flip a Johnny if given the opportunity, but is this a position to flip a Johnny?
Yeah, I mean the no red cards definitely affects that a little bit because like I said the clock is just so much lower that way, but
I mean,
So
having
the Fairy Mastermind gets to attack this turn, so
yeah,
if you flip your Johnny, it's going to be -2 loyalty immediately.
for sure, but it gets to stay in play, and then Winds of Abandon presumably means that it gets to then stay around. So I think it seems like you can defend the Ajani if you choose to flip it, and it feels like a flipped Ajani is better than any of these other cards.
Yeah, and I think the only other choice is if you're worried about your hand sort of petering out and you would just want access to more cards, you might keep the Bronco. But I think those are the only two real choices, and flipping a Planeswalker seems pretty hard to turn down.
Yeah, the only reason I would be hesitant about this is that JT knows about the Winds of Abandon and is making this play. Like, maybe he's forced to do this play anyway, but
it would be an extreme power move if JT let him do all of that, flip the card, put the die on it, and then somehow killed it anyways.
well, if he had had an untapped white mana here, because Scott
Oh.
said that there was
Snuff Out.
Scott had said that there was a sword, so if he had
Mm-hmm.
balanced with a white mana up, let the trigger go on the stack, and then swords it just
Yeah.
to wipe Spurlock's board, would have been insane. Did nothing else have to happen with that balance? Players had the exact same number of cards, exact same number of lands. Okay.
Yep.
Looks like it.
It's like Freebooter and Jacked Rabbit. Where the draws there.
They have the same number of cards in hand.
Frog, a pretty good follow-up there, though.
Yeah, but JT moving very quick after this untap.
Okay, True
True
Name
Name
Nemesis.
Nemesis, good.
True Name and Swords.
And we're just gonna plow the frog, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, Spurlock's deck, every time we've seen it, the blue seems like a splash. Unlikely he has counterspell. Maybe you can get him to discard a card. He at least has to exile 3 cards from his graveyard to fly the frog, which hurts his Lurrus deck, so it makes sense to wait. I like the read from what appears to be the read from JT's side that Spurlock is not playing counter magic in his deck.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like waiting on the swords because of precisely that. I think at the very minimum you're getting 3 cards out of his graveyard with that play.
Right. It's just against a blue deck, the idea of letting him untap his blue source can be scary, but like at this point, we as the viewer, but even JT in the match, having only played 1 game prior to this, is able to feel confident Spurlock's probably not playing any counter magic in his deck.
Certainly.
Big rabbit.
Yeah, that is a very Jacked Rabbit. I mean, we have the True Name Nemesis to block it, but it... Okay, well, never mind.
Yeah, I was going to say, it
Is
just
that-
needs
is that-
Securitron Squadron to follow it up.
Is that JT's first like hint of what his deck is trying to do here? Playing a 5-mana artifact?
Yeah. Well, I think that goes to show how much like Prose looking at some of those cards and taking a couple of the artifact cards does mean JT maybe didn't end up with all the stuff he wanted, because that element of his deck is definitely less pronounced.
Right. Yeah, so there's that Urza as well.
And Giver runes. I wonder if Spurlock is annoyed that both of those, Giver and Mother, were in this draft and he didn't get either for
Either of
his
them?
strategy.
Yeah.
Urza's looking pretty solid here.
Just a 2/2 construct, but obviously that can change pretty quickly. It's just going to load up here, it looks like. Signet to make it a 3/3.
Yeah, I gotta say, JT looked behind at one point, and if like Spurlock's gonna overload this, if he has the land to overload, he's in good shape.
Yeah, I was going to say that even with the True Name Nemesis, the Winds of Abandon Overloaded would take care of that.
Yeah, it feels like JT was in a position where I don't think he could play around it, because replaying the Lurrus, getting to replay then probably a Johnny first turn on that, like, I think he just has to take the risk that Spurlock doesn't have the last land to overload, and that he can just, like, kill him with these big creatures real quick. But Spurlock obviously doesn't look like he's found a land here. Would have seen it much faster, I imagine.
Yeah, but that threat's not going to go away unless he feels pressured enough to like use it as a 1-for-1.
Oh, we didn't need the land.
Oh, okay. Well,
How much is this for? It's for 4, it seems, if Urza's gone, so.
and a follow-up creature with the Lurrus ready to go.
Okay, well, this has been kind of whiplash the last couple turns. Looks like the Ether Spark, which is going to do about nothing on this board.
Yeah, not the top deck you're wanting after your all your
of your
creatures
creatures
die.
die. Yeah.
It doesn't really matter how he taps for this, right?
No. Yeah, so he can plus it. Doesn't do anything. I think it's a -6 if you want to draw cards with it. It might be -5 though.
It's -5, so
Okay.
he's threatening to be able to draw 2 cards with it next turn.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
Spurlock
which-
has all the power here. He can prevent that Ether Spark from doing anything relevant. He can just crash in and get JT dead as soon as possible, not even caring about the extra cards. He's fully in the driver's seat and has complete control of this game here.
Yeah, I would imagine it is the 2 damage to JT doesn't allow him to have lethal next turn, so I imagine he would attack the Aether Spark. I assume this is Lurrus, Ajani, attack the Aether Spark. Because that is 8.
Nope, just goes upstairs, looks like. Puts him in a 9. He has 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. Unless he has a way to find one more power. I'm trying to think what we've seen from him that would accomplish that.
I
Can't think
can't
of
think of
anything.
anything.
I mean, the God of Souls is in his graveyard if he can also add, 3 creatures to the board after that.
Well,
But-
only one. He has 2 energy at the top of the screen there from when he played
Oh,
Ajani
okay.
with
Well,
it in play. So you're right. Absolutely good spot that he can replay that next turn because of Lurrus, and then he just has to play any creature, which he's playing a creature-based deck, which gives him lethal. Yeah.
So played the Coveted Jewel. We drew the new card whose name I can't remember that mobilizes.
Yeah, that is not good here.
But also drew Portable Hole, it looks like. So we can Portable Hole something?
Not good enough to prevent lethal, I don't think. Oh, no, it would be. Yeah.
Well, if you Portable Hole to Lurrus, the God of Souls is...
You can't portable
it's
hole
2 or
Lurrus.
less, not 3 or less, yeah.
Yeah. As long as you portable hole a 2-power creature, it ends up being enough.
So you do this...
really like drawing 2 cards with the Ether Spark here after we landed Coveted Jewel. Like we have 5 more mana still to work with on the turn. And the Ether Spark was doing actually nothing, so...
The Voice of Victory coming down, not fantastic in this matchup, I don't feel. I maybe would have looked to sideboard it out, as it's just not that much of an instant speed interaction. Like, Spurlock has some of it, but you definitely want it more for
Lethal
other
Scheme here
matchups.
feels pretty good.
It's pretty good, but it, was 4 life off the Dark Confidant. The lifelink on Lurrus means this probably is not going to be that relevant, but
Right,
it's kinda
especially
spooky.
because I expect he might be jumping Lurrus this turn if he has the creature to play.
Okay, so Fatal Push. That looked like Securitron Squadron, but...
Interesting.
Oh, I guess...
He had lethal here. Because he took the Ajani, this is 7, so if
there was a
he
creature,
had-
yeah.
But he has the Securitron Squadron, as you said, so he could have played the Guide of Souls from the graveyard, played the Securitron Squadron, and had lethal.
This was way more fun, though. He drew Black Lotus. I'm just saying, man. He doesn't get to draw 3
Sure.
cards from Coveted Jewel if the game ends. Well, I guess he does, but he doesn't get to play any of them. What's the point in drawing your cards if you're not going to play them, man? Come on. All right, Sculler reveals Island in a workshop.
I believe that's okay.
I think it was a workshop. He's going to lethal scheme his own Dark Confidant, and yeah, that's just going to prompt a concession. So
Really impressive few matches there for Spurlock. I mean, he just did it. He did the thing. He drafted Lurrus and Black Lotus, within the first 5 picks of his entire draft, and he stayed the course and was rewarded with a 3-0.
And I pointed out at the end that one of the things he said to me at the end of my match, because not just us as observers, but in the match I had missed a couple of my plays. We talked through that match. Seemed like he had great analysis on all of it as well. So really great piloting of the deck overall. Really insightful plays from him all the way through. Well-deserved 3-0.
We're quickly racing towards our Cube Invitational here. We have one draft day before that, and I gotta say, Spurlock is one of the players I'm most worried about meeting in that event. He has been performing incredibly well this season, and it's his first season with us. We're a bunch of strangers to him, and he just showed up and he's kicking all our butts.
In Vintage Cube, no less. There are some players who have earned a lot of their 3-0 points from our other cubes, but a lot of at the end of the day, it comes down to that Vintage Cube draft at the end of the Cube Invitational. So we will see you guys at that point as we go through our next set of cubes and soon for the Cube Invitational.
So with that, Spurlock cleans up today's draft with a 3-0, all 3 of his wins coming on camera with a masterpiece of a deck. Congratulations to him on a job well done. This was the second to last draft weekend before our Cube Invitational, which will be taking place June 7th and 8th, and competition for the last spots couldn't be much tighter. We currently have Joey, Matt, Spurlock fresh off of this 3-0, and Scott holding down the top 4 spots based on their best 8 finishes in drafts this season. Prose, Pellman, Daniel, and JT are rounding out the top 8 as our at-large seeds based on their total wins over the entire season. With 1 draft weekend and 2 drafts remaining, Brian, Bats, and Diddert are holding on to a chance to sneak in as well, so be sure to keep an eye out for an update video in the coming weeks or an official announcement on our socials when those qualifiers are finalized. As always, you can find links to our socials and Cube info in the description below. Thank you as always for watching, and don't forget to come back next time.